all those moments will be lost in time.
Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be telling you guys a story time that really scared the crap out of me as a child, and it scared me again, and you'll understand why. But before I get into the video, I wanted to let you guys know that this video is sponsored by Goosebumps Horror Town. So Goosebumps Horror Town is a city builder kind of game, but it has the extra twist that since it's Goosebumps, it's a little bit scary and you get to unleash monsters upon the people living there. The cool thing is that you get to place the buildings as you want to, which is kind of reminiscent of other city building games, and it's actually pretty cool because, as you can see, when you start scaring people by unleashing the monsters, they run away, and it's pretty funny seeing them run away. Honestly, that's one of my favorite parts of this game. Another cool thing is that the characters can be really devious. So for example, some of the kids aren't really good kids, so you get to make them TP the school or annoy one of their teachers, which is really fun and creative. So essentially what you do in this game is that each character has certain tasks that they're supposed to do, and once they do those tasks, you can get objects that are helpful, you can get money, and then you can get little green blobs that essentially help you level up. Right now I'm at level 11. As you can see, I've placed quite a few buildings, and it's been really cool to see just how it develops and how each character kind of knows each other. So I'm going to be including the link in order to download this game in the description. I honestly really suggest it if you were into Goosebumps like I was, or if you like city building games that have a kind of twist and have a creepier side, even though it's not really scary as much as it's funny kind of scary. Anyways, this being said, let's get right into the video. So when I decided I wanted to tell this story on my channel, I had to ask the family member in question because this is something that she lived and she told me about. So I wasn't there. I don't even know if I was born at the time. I don't think so. So this was quite a long time ago. And I asked her for permission, and I also asked for extra details because when she did tell me the story, I was 13 or 14, so I would understand omitting certain troubling details. So this is a story about possession by something. I'm not going to say a demon necessarily, but some kind of possession. If you don't believe in this, it's fine. It's not worth commenting saying, oh, this is crap, you totally made this up, because I didn't make it up. Whether you believe it or not is a different story. Okay, so we're gonna call this family member Clara. So Clara was very involved with this church, and she remained involved with this church for a lot of her life. I even got my first communion where this happened, so that creeps me out just thinking about it. But essentially she was really involved with her church, and at this point in time it was kind of a trend in the church world, at least in Italy, for priests to visit churches, but especially exorcist type priests. Now what she told me was that it's pretty complicated, but essentially it's like no one essentially was an exorcist, but they were mandated by higher ups to be an exorcist. So it's not like they chose it as much as it was kind of put upon them. But that's kind of a technicality. So he happened to come to Clara's church. So when he came to Clara's church, there were multiple masses, and since she was really involved, she was always helping kind of set things up because he was a big deal. So there were people coming in. She kept saying that there were like busloads of people coming in. So it was a big event and they needed all the help they could get, which is why she obviously volunteered. One of these masses happened at nighttime, and Clara was there as always to help, and this touring priest, the exorcist, was giving a mass. And one of the masses that he was giving, I don't know what the name is in English. It's a kind of mass that is trying to get away evil specifically. So it's not necessarily a mass for the possessed, but it's also a mass that could help the possessed in the sense that it really had an emphasis on getting rid of the evil that potentially is inside you. So there was already this kind of tone of this mass is a little bit more specific than, say, any other mass you go to on a random Sunday. Okay, so now that I've set the scene, let's talk about when things start getting really freaking creepy. So there was a little boy on a wheelchair, and he was what we'd call in Italian autolesionista, which is essentially a self-harmer. The thing is, he's not the typical self-harmer in the sense that when I think of self-harming, I think of trigger warning to anyone cutting or acts like that. he was a self-harmer in the sense that he would just like bang his body against things, you know? So it was just like just not what I associate with self-harm whatsoever. And anyways, he was kind of held back by some, not restraints, but he was put in place so that he couldn't hurt himself, right? So as the mass is going on, this little boy, for some reason, I guess whatever was holding his head in place, moves, and he starts banging his head and just like growling and growling. And note that this is at night. Remember that, because that's what makes it creepier to me. So he starts banging his head and just growling continuously to the point where the priest is having to raise his voice. So as this is happening, and this is what creeps me out the most, there is a man and a woman, and the man starts barking, literally barking just like a dog. And you could say, like, you know, maybe they were pretending, whatever, maybe. That doesn't make it any less scary to me. Like, that's terrifying to me at night in a mass. That's kind of wishing evil away from inside of you when people start acting this way. So he starts barking and barking and barking while that kid on the wheelchair is growling. Then there's a woman, and this is what I think is the most troubling to me. So the woman gets up and essentially starts speaking a distorted ancient language. So Clara, the family friend, speaks Latin. Most Italian people learn Latin, so that wouldn't have been weird. There are a lot of masses that are still in Latin, so if it were Latin, a lot of people would have just been like, okay, that's not too weird, though why are you getting up and screaming it? But she was speaking a distorted sort of ancient language. It sounded like Latin, but it wasn't correct Latin. And the thing that I remember Clara telling me that scared her the most is that it felt like it was coming from her stomach. Like, her voice had changed. Her voice was not the voice that she usually had, because some of the people in this church, you know, like, they were frequent churchgoers, not everyone was a tourist. So her voice was no longer the same, and it was entirely from the stomach. And this woman ended up starting walking towards the priest, to the point where the priest actually changed some of the prayer and moved it towards a prayer that you'd say towards someone who is possessed. So before it was just like generally ridding you of evil, and here it was like for someone who has something inside them. And she kept going up to him, and he just kept saying it louder and louder and louder, because there was the kid on the wheelchair who kept growling, the guy who kept barking and just making weird noises and like twitching. And what happened is that Clara ended up leaving because this was like very troubling. And what they told her after is that apparently, I guess, the prayer worked, or whatever had risen in these three people went back down to sleep, or whatever it was, it just stopped. But honestly, I don't know if I do this story justice, because when I tell these kinds of stories, I guess it's so like troubling for me that I kind of trip over my own words. But that scared the shit out of me, and she told me that she had trouble sleeping that night, and I don't blame her whatsoever. And you know, whether you believe in demons or spirits or ghosts or not, what I think is really troubling here is people going outside of behavioral norms. You know, like, there's a certain code of respect in a church, and if you're in a church, you're supposed to follow that code. So I think that even if you don't believe in demons or whatever, the fact that they are breaking this code so openly and acting so strangely makes you wonder, like, why are they doing this? And had it been only one person, you could be like, okay, maybe, you know, they have some mental illness or some kind of other explanation. But the fact that three people did this, and for me, the scariest part, that woman speaking that distorted kind of language with like a deep voice that wasn't hers, that to me is just fuel for a nightmare, honestly. If I'd been there, I don't know, I wouldn't have slept for a month after. Anyways, that was the story of the possession that I'd mentioned in a live stream once. I hope it didn't disappoint you guys. Anyways, thank you again to Goosebumps Horror Town for sponsoring this. I really suggest that you guys click the link and download it, give it a try. It's honestly really fun. I spent so much time playing that game the other day. Anyways, let's get right into the fan art. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons as always.